Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Welcome back, everybody, to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. We've arrived at the finale for Big Ten Conference Week, the conference power rankings and previews as presented by Underdog Fantasy. And thanks to you guys, the Jimmies and the Joes, who filled out our surveys over on Twitter. We have arrived at the final 6 teams for the contenders for the Big Ten this year, and by extension, contenders for the playoff. I think it'll be interesting, guys, as we talk through these 6 teams and kind of try and make a case for how many of them we think can make it to the college football playoff. That's something that I've been thinking about as we prepare for this. But 6 final teams, and Trey, before we get into that, this episode, all of our episodes this year, brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Excited to have them on board. We saw that Best Bowl, Bowl Mania is officially live over on Underdog, and you immediately jumped in to enjoying the fruits of that labor.
Yeah, Best Bowl Mania. It's kind of hard to say, but it's a play on their Best Ball Mania tournament. That's a big NFL one that they do every year. This one has $200K in prizes that you're eligible for. It's a year-long tournament. So basically, it's best ball fantasy for college. You draft a team in the summer. It's a larger roster, and then there's no week-by-week management. The computer just takes your best performers each week, puts it in the score for you, and you climb up the leaderboard week by week, and hopefully you make it to the playoffs of that tournament. So at the end, the top 3 from your little group move on, and then top performers move on each week. And at the end, there's one person left standing that can win $20K, but there's also a lot of prize pools that you can win for hitting certain other milestones. So yeah, I'm in. Maybe you're in a league with me already. If you're not, I'm sure I'll make a few more teams to enter in. It's just a easy $10 entry. And if you use our code, then they match your first deposit up to $1,000. So yeah, no excuse to not get on and just get your football fix, scratch that itch here in July. It's been awesome. I'm only 1 round into a slow draft, but I'm already strategizing. I'm loving it so far.
Yeah, and I think it's just, what, $10 to enter? Is that right?
$10 to enter. Yeah, $10.
10.
So if you put $10 in, use our code, then you'll get $10 right back that you can use on another entry or whatever you'd like.
That's right. 3TechPod is the code. You can use that when you sign up. If you're a first-time user, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus funds matched by Underdog to your account, and you also get a free pick. Now, right now, they've got obviously just the Best Bowl Mania going on because, well, the season isn't live. But when you get to the college football season, you'll get that free pick. We're going to be very active in that. Content will be coming all season long. So again, thank you to Underdog Fantasy for partnering with us this year, and we're excited to see what all that holds for the 2025 season. But with that, let's get into the contenders. If you have listened to our first 2 episodes of Big Ten Content Week, we've gone through the bowl hopefuls. We've gone through the dark horses and storylines. If you have not, at 3TechPod on all social channels, we would encourage you to go listen to those. 12 teams have already been broken down. We're to the final 6. And guys, we are starting with the Indiana Hoosiers as voted on by you guys, the Jimmies and the Joes. Indiana was a true worst to first storyline last year. Curt Cignetti comes in. Indiana has just been the doormat of the Big Ten. And out of nowhere, he brings in Curtis Rourke from Ohio, and a bunch of players come over with him as well. And suddenly it is all systems go. Indiana is off to the races, the second best scoring offense. They had one of the top defenses in the country as well last year. But this year, the big storyline to me feels like, is this for real? Is Indiana a one-hit wonder, or can they actually sustain some of that success. And guys, they have a really good shot at keeping the quarterback production going. They bring in Fernando Mendoza from Cal, who comes over. He threw for over 3,000 yards last year, despite one of the worst offensive lines in the country. A wide receiver core that was inconsistent at best. Some bright spots like Isaiah Hunter, who we've talked about in past episodes. But the rest of the offense is really good around Mendoza as well. Elijah Surratt stays. He had almost 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. Amar Cooper, almost 600 yards, 7 touchdowns a season ago. And then Garrett, your guy, Robin Himby, transfers over from Maryland to lead the running back room. They've got some really good offensive line players that they plucked out of the portal. Pat Coogan, part of those, a couple of those Notre Dame guys that left. It was very surprising at the time. And then Khalil Benson joins an actual football team, leaving Colorado and coming over to the Hoosiers. So I like the offense. The defense was second in the country last year as well. I don't know that they're going to necessarily be able to replicate that, but they've got Mikhail Kamara, who comes back. If you read our preview series that is over on Substack, it's in the same format as our audio preview. So you can listen, you can read all at the same time. He's the cover boy of the Indiana Graphic for a reason. He was extremely productive last year. They've got replacements at the linebacker position and in the secondary as well. So I feel like overall, they've got talent to for sure be a contender in the Big Ten. Now, the question is, can they get back to the playoff? Can they compete for a Big Ten title? Those are things that I'm probably going to be in wait and see mode as we enter 2025.
Yeah, I think for me, it's going to be, can Fernando Mendoza continue that magic? He was kind of Diego Pavia after dark, honestly, just willing Cal to a bunch of wins that maybe not a lot of people saw because their games were on really late. And can the defense replicate just the absolute havoc they created last year? They had 35 sacks. They were plus 15 in the turnover margin. A lot of people forgot about the defense. It was kind of the offense stealing the show. But I think at one point late in the season, Indiana was number 1 in scoring offense and number 1 in scoring defense in the entire country. So it truly was a two-phased attack for Indiana. Whether or not they can get back to the playoff is going to depend on if those two things continue. If Mendoza can continue the success that Curtis Rourke had, the defense can replicate the success they had last year. And obviously the big storyline was the soft schedule that Indiana faced. Not all of it was their fault, but some of the bigger opponents that they were banking on being signature wins ended up not being as good. Michigan was not the national championship caliber team. And then when they did face teams like Ohio State and Notre Dame, they were coming up on the short end of the stick of those. But this year, it's a step up in the schedule. They have a really soft non-conference again, Old Dominion, Kennesaw, Indiana State. But right out of the gate, guys, in conference play, they host Illinois in a game that I've said multiple times this summer I can't wait to see, because that's like the battle of who's actually legit. And we get it week 1 of Big Ten play early on in September. And then after that, if they survive Illinois at home, they go to Iowa. We talked about how high we are on them last time. They have a bye week, and then they go to Oregon. So we're going to know very early on if Indiana is legit this year. In contrast to last year when we were sitting there Thanksgiving week wondering, well, they're 11-1, but what is the committee going to think about that resume? We'll know very, very early on. We'll know by October this year if Indiana is a legit college football playoff contender or not.
I think we're going to know a little bit after week 1 how salty that defense is that brought in some reinforcements along the line of scrimmage, because Colton Joseph and the Old Dominion Monarchs are not going to be as talented as a Big Ten team, but they have their eyes set on the top of the Sun Belt. And I like Ricky Ronnie's team. We talked about them in the Sun Belt preview. I'm very high on Old Dominion. So they're going to get punched probably very early on in the schedule. And then you're right. I mean, there's just no warm up to conference play whatsoever. Garrett, the defense is what I keep coming back to. They have Devon Boykin from NC State coming over to play a hybrid role. They've got Hosea Wheeler, who comes over from Western Kentucky, Rylan Gandy, who steps into the starting lineup at cornerback. It feels like if there is one side of the ball that I might expect a regression back to the mean, it would be on that defensive side. Although, Tino Sunseri is gone to UCLA as well, the architect of that offense last year.
Yeah, there's It's kind of hard to tell what Indiana's going to be. For me, they're the biggest sort of wild card in the Big Ten, but maybe not just the Big Ten, maybe in the country in terms of just what are we going to get from them, right? I think I mentioned it last show. Is Kurt Signetti really just football Jesus? Like, did he come in here and save the program and just turn everything around and it's amazing? Or did he kind of just catch lightning in a bottle, right? Like, is this just, you found the right players at the right time to fit your scheme? Talked about a lot of the transfers that came in. I also kind of like that, we're talking about Fernando Mendoza as, I think by transitive property now, the poor man's Johnny Manziel after dark, after, comparing him to Diego Pavi. I think that's kind of where he stands now. So I'll
The homeless man's Johnny
the
Manziel.
homeless man's, the homeless fans, Johnny Manziel after dark. But no, I think the defense was kind of quietly one of the better units. I mean, they held when you go to Ohio State and you look at the game that they played against them, they held them to 14 in the first half. And then it really wasn't until Caleb Downs returned that punt that things even turned around. And so, I look at them and I say, maybe it was a little bit fluky. Maybe there were parts of it that were just the schedule, but I kind of think there might be some validity to this Indiana Hoosiers team. I think the people that are eager to write them off as just kind of a one and done might be jumping the gun a little bit.
Sure.
That's not to say that they're going, 11-2 this year. It's not to say they'll make it back to the playoff because the schedule is a little trickier. They have more teams that should be contenders up there, but I think that anyone who just wants to roll over on this Indiana team and say, well, they lost some players and whatever else, like I don't think you're paying attention if you're saying that. I think, again, like a lot of people would point to a guy like Justice Ellison who's not there, but you mentioned him like Roman Hemby. I'm big fan of Roman Hemby. He's a very talented back. I think he has a little bit more upside in terms of what he could achieve. And so I think, like, again, if you're just looking at this team and saying they lost some pieces, so, oh, well, that was a fun year one, nice story. They're the new TCU or whatever it is. Like, I just don't think you're paying attention if you're going to compare them to a team like that. I think this is a much better team, and it's being run by, I think, a much better coach.
They plug their holes really well, which is not something that you can say about some of these flash in the pan programs that you see. A lot of times you can point to one or two flaws. And honestly, when I was doing my research on Indiana, I was expecting to see that. I was expecting to see what we typically see from these types of programs where you're like, yeah, it all kind of came together for one year. You mentioned that TCU team from a few years ago, Garrett, where you could really point to like, okay, they're losing a quarterback that was just a gamer. Right. They're losing a running back in Kendre Miller that put the team on his back several times. They're losing talented wide receivers. And that's kind of true for Indiana, but they backfilled those gaps with guys that have proven that they can do it, not something that TCU did a few years ago. So in addition to that, I just feel like they have an identity that they are committed to on both sides of the ball, and that puts them so far ahead of so many other teams that they're going to find on their schedule, even a tougher schedule like this one. It's a havoc defense, like I mentioned, but they're bringing back their leading tackler, their leading sack guy, their leader in pass breakups, and their leader in interceptions from last year. So even if there's holes, there's a solid core to build around, and there's a winning culture at Indiana that they can build off of. If this schedule was there in year one, I'd be a lot more concerned for Signetti, but he has the skins on the wall and he has that winning culture in place already, so they can maybe weather that storm a little bit better.
I think those are all great points made by both of you. I think this program has certainly turned around. I don't know that any of us are. I mean, it's clear that none of us are going to argue that they're a flash in the pan. Mm-hmm. I think we all believe in the direction that Indiana's going. They're recruiting well. In addition to that, Signetti is just a winner, right? I mean, that's what he went viral for saying last year, right? Just Google me, I win. So with that, we all believe that Indiana is going to be a good football team. The question is how good, though. The line is 8.5, which I think is a fascinating line because with all the positives that we've said about Indiana, the offense should be really good. The defense got more physical, plugged those holes. They have a lot of those returners coming back. I feel like 9-3 is very possible, and that's even if they lose to all the major opponents, right, on this schedule. That's if they lose to Oregon or Iowa. Or at Penn State, right? Those are probably the three big ones. Illinois is also there. I guess you could flip Illinois and Iowa. I guess I'm tipping my hand of how much I think of Iowa in this year. But you take three opponents of your choosing and say, okay, they lose those games. you're still 9-3 and in contention for a college football playoff berth, and you're hitting the over. So to go under here, you basically have to do, I guess, what they did last year, which was every team that was like really, really good, which was just two, Notre Dame and Ohio State. Again, not their fault. It was just how the schedule played out for them. But they lost those two games. So if you're going to say that Indiana repeats that and they just lose to every team that's kind of a class above them, that may be how you get to the under. How do you guys see this playing out for the Hoosiers?
I think this is a team that I'm willing to trust a little bit more than some of the other teams in this contenders list. And a lot of it has to boil down to the quarterback spot. I think they'll hit the over here. I think 9-3 is an extremely manageable floor for them. I don't think they'll lose I don't think they lose all of those 4 games there. And there's a couple opportunities there to knock off a team that you might actually be better than. But one of the reasons I trust Indiana is the quarterback spot. Only 2 of those teams that are in the contenders list tonight return their quarterback. Other than that, you're looking at some guys that are getting their first real look at college football action, and or like in some of their cases, they've seen some college football action, didn't look that good. Whereas again, like Mendoza, like he's coming in here, he's a pretty solid quarterback who had success against some good teams last year. I think I trust him a little bit more than, right now, at least I trust him more than the quarterbacks at, Michigan, Oregon, Ohio State. Not to say that they're the better team than those, not to say that by the time they play them, that those quarterbacks don't find their footing and maybe surpass him, but he's definitely got the highest floor for me. So I think right now, just being able to trust out of this and being able to say like, hey, who do I trust right now to hit that number most? I think Indiana might be one of those teams that I look at right now and say, I trust you to get this done. Though I do think this could be one of those wild cards where a couple weeks into the season, we're like, okay, I guess Curtis Rourke was really just the real deal, and maybe this team wasn't all that good. I don't think it's that, but I will allow for the possibility. I'll give myself an out when they try to dig this clip up later on in the season because they're 0-4 to start the year or something.
Well, yeah, and like I said earlier, we will know very early on if we should take Indiana seriously. We'll know by the middle of October, and it's going to come down to those 4 games, whether or not they hit this over. It's going to come down to those 4 games: Illinois at home, at Iowa, at Oregon, and then at Penn State later on in November. So even going 1-3, I really don't see another team on the schedule that I wouldn't pick Indiana in a vacuum against right now.
Mm-hmm.
So they just feel like a better caliber of program. They're not upset proof yet. Like there's just teams that you list off, obviously the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Texases of the world. You feel like they're kind of upset proof. Not that they'll never lose in those games where they overmatch the opponent, but it's just really, really unlikely. Indiana's not quite there yet, but they're just in a tier above every other program on their schedule where I don't feel comfortable picking against them in those games. So even just going 1-3, finding a way to win 1 of those 4, they're hitting the over. And if they can win 2, I think there's no question that they'll have a playoff resume at the end of the year.
I think it's a good point that you make to close. I wrote that Indiana can go 8-4 and still be a very good team. Like because of the depth of the conference, I think you could lose to some very highly ranked opponents on your schedule on the road, and you could slip up in one other place, go 8-4. And yes, it would feel disappointing. It would feel like, man, we could have made the playoff again. We had this goal, we had this ceiling, but the team is still a very, very good team. And so, Garrett, you made the point last episode that some of these teams got to lose, right? Not everybody can go 10-2. And so for me in this contender list, I'm going to take Indiana to hit the under. I'll go 8-4. Still, I think a very good team, but they just feel like, to me, because of the step up in competition, I don't know. I'm going to roll the dice and risk that. Also,
it would be funny if they went 1-3 in those games, but like ruined Penn State's season. Like that would be the most Penn State thing for them to like get past everybody and then just blow it to Indiana at the end.
I mean, certainly could happen. They've done it to Penn State before, albeit in the COVID year when Penn State was kind of terrible, but they've done it before. Last thing I'll say before we move on, these graphics, Trey, just incredibly sweet. If you are not watching on YouTube, just go pull up the YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, hit subscribe. And just check out the graphics that we've got
The-
rolling here for these
The
previews.
script Hoosiers makes my work pretty easy. I will say
Yeah.
that's just naturally a pretty sweet look, and
Looks
the
pretty
color
sick,
scheme
yeah.
of Indiana is just
Yep.
always works.
And if you want to wear the script Hoosiers, you can head on over to other partner of ours, homefieldapparel.com. Use our code 3TechPod for 15% off and get yourself some nice Indiana Hoosiers, any other team you'd like, gear with a discount. Support the show. Cha-ching. Number 5, the Illinois Fighting Illini. They burst through last year to a 10-3 record. It was an incredible jump forward in results for Bielema and the boys. Luke Altmaier, who I doubted this time last year in the previews, he stopped turning the football over. He, other than the Oregon game, but over the course of the season was a lot more efficient, took care of the football. I love the physicality with which Illinois played. They threw the football very well last year. They had some really nice wide receivers that I feel like a lot of the country just kind of completely underrated because you're not used to Illinois throwing the ball to electric wide receivers. This year, though, the question is, can they duplicate that success? Can they handle maybe the lack of oxygen up here as they climb closer and closer towards the sun? Or they're number 5 in our contenders ranking right now. The Jimmies and the Joes obviously think the world of them. But when you're talking about being compared to the likes of Oregon and Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State, the teams that are obviously going to be in front of you, I'm curious to hear how you guys think that the Illini stack up here in 2025.
This is another team where I feel like going into preview season, I was expecting to do my research and see, okay, here's the flaw everyone's just kind of glossing over. Like Illinois has been getting all this love from February through June, but here's a very obvious flaw that we're glossing over. I don't think Illinois has a fatal flaw necessarily, and I am more on board with Illinois than I was when I started the research process on them. The biggest question to me, you hinted at it, Mitch, is who replaces Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin at wide receiver? And if you had that on your bingo card for Illinois that they need to replace a dynamic receiving duo, if you haven't been paying attention to their football team the last couple of years, you might be really surprised by that. But outside of Ohio State, it was maybe the second or third best wide receiver tandem in the whole conference last year. And they're both out the door, obviously, off to the NFL, and they'll need to find replacement receivers for them. That's the biggest question mark to me. Can that offense be dynamic without those two set in stone guys? And I also need to see the offensive line improve to fully buy into them as a playoff contender. All 5 starters are back. That's a big deal, but they allowed 32 sacks last year. So It's not necessarily, obviously continuity and growth and development are huge on the offensive line. That's naturally going to happen when guys play together for another year, but that's a unit that's definitely got to step up in my mind for me to buy them as a true playoff contender and not just a borderline higher bowl team.
I had the same questions. As far as the wide receiving core goes, I feel like to me that's more answered by what I know about the guys that they plugged in with the portal. So Hudson Clement from West Virginia comes over. I love him. He's absolutely my personal favorite. I wrote about him in the written preview. Justin Bowick comes over from Ball State, almost 400 yards of receiving last year, a couple of touchdowns with him. And then they've got some solid production at tight end as well. Now, is that Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin? Probably not. But I think the runway is there to get the passing game in a very competitive spot. You mentioned the offensive line, though, and that was, without a doubt, the number one question when I looked at this team because those 32 sacks were the worst mark in the Big Ten last year. Specifically, 15 of those sacks, guys, came in their losses to Penn State, to Oregon, and to Minnesota. Altmaier was running for his life when he faced an NFL-esque defensive line. The offensive line just had no answer to it. And so if that continues this year, we'll get to their schedule in just a second, that's going to prevent them from being a true contender in my mind. If they can build that wall, though, which we've seen Bielema teams be very good along the offensive line, right? I mean, his time at Arkansas, it was throw a stone and you were going to hit a future NFL All-Pro is what it felt like. So if Illinois can get back to winning in the trenches, establishing that run game, and then protecting their quarterback off of that, I really feel like Illinois has a good chance to be very, very good and be a team that could knock off an Oregon or knock off an Iowa, opponents of that ilk. Garrett, also on the defense, they had to rebuild the defense again. They had to go through the portal. Aaron Henry is the defensive coordinator there. Secondary is all back, including cornerback Xavier Scott, who's an all Big Ten selection last year. They've got some veteran linebackers that return, but the defensive line needs James Thompson and Kurt Neal, both coming from Wisconsin, to play big roles. They've got a transfer from Florida State that comes in. Defense allowed just 21 points and some change last year. With those changes, especially in the trenches, do you expect that to improve, regress? Where do you feel like the Illini net out on the defensive side?
It's tough to figure out just because they're bringing in so many new pieces on the defensive line. Of course, you'd rather replace guys on the defensive line because they can kind of just play as solo as opposed to on the offensive line where they got to play as a unit, right? And by the way, I do think the 5 guys coming back is going to be a massive net positive for them, that they've played together. They know how to play with each other, and they're going to get a whole off season to, kind of check some notes and do that. So that, by the way, just should be a lot better in my book. But no, I think, look, when you bring back a lot of your defense in the back part as well, and you're playing teams, kind of early on in this schedule, like Indiana, like USC, like Ohio State, you're happy to have some of those teams earlier who are, more of the pass happier teams at times and who are going to try to throw the ball down because you've got a secondary that's played together before. You've got a secondary who knows the scheme, they know their assignments, and should make it easy to kind of weather that early. The big key for me for that defense is going to be, are they going to be on the field a bunch? Because, kind of like we said, Altmaier stopped turning the ball over last season, save one game. Is that going to be a trend that continues if he has to kind of force the ball to maybe a worse receiving core, right? It's nice when you have those guys down there you can trust and or, kind of live to fight to play the next down. If he has to start kind of forcing it to try to get some plays to happen downfield, or if they kind of clamp down on the run game a little bit, force them into bad situations, is he going to revert to his old self, or is he going to, stay responsible with the ball? That's a big thing for that defense as well. Is, you don't want to get, out over your skis. You don't want that experienced secondary running laps and getting winded by the time you hit that third and fourth quarter, because there's too many good teams that are going to make you pay for it. This is a good defense that should play really well. There's nothing about this defense that makes me afraid, that makes me think that we're going to, see massive regression. It's just something to keep an eye on with that defensive line and see if, they can kind of control a little bit of line of scrimmage. And then again, like I said, time of possession is going to be big for them as well.
Yeah, Trey, you're high on Gabe Jackas, who comes back off the edge. That's a nice piece that Illinois has. Certainly the pass rush, a guy that was...
I think top 5 tacklers total are back too. So they definitely have a lot of pieces to work with on the defense.
Sure. So with that, we talked about Indiana having a softer schedule last year. This year, they kind of load up, right? Illinois, it seems like the opposite, where this year, I think their schedule is actually rather forgiving. So they've got an over-under of 8.5, according to Vegas right now. To me, guys, the danger spots start in week 2 when they go to Wallace Wade Stadium to take on Duke. Trey, you talked about that in an earlier episode where I think you've got Illinois squarely on upset alert. Duke is a team that we're all very high on. I think we're going to echo all of those sentiments when we get to our ACC preview week as well. So it starts early in week 2. They've got a road trip to Indiana in week 4. They'll play USC for homecoming and then Ohio State on October 11th before their bye week. After that, they've got a road trip to Washington. They've got Rutgers, Maryland, at Wisconsin, and Northwestern. So certainly the toughest part of the schedule is up front, that first half of the season. If they can weather the storm, I think they can absolutely hit their over here, especially given what we feel like we know about Bielema and how he continues to build on teams, year over year. I seem to trust Illinois to get to 9 wins, maybe even more so than I do Indiana this season.
I want to, but then you look at year over year their results, and it's 5-7, 8-5, 5-7, 10-3. Got to avoid the fallback year, and I think they do have the schedule to do it. I think you're right, but there's just some landmines, man, that make me just a little antsy. That Duke game that you highlighted, going to Washington is not going to be easy. Wisconsin, I know that's going to be the end of an absolutely brutal run for Wisconsin that we highlighted on an earlier episode this week, but Camp Randall's not an easy place to play. They played Oregon very close in November last year, even at the end of a disappointing season. So just a lot of landmines and not a lot of obvious Sharpie in losses, maybe Ohio State. And that's probably it from a standpoint of we're pretty sure they're going to lose that game. But it's just, there's a lot of difficult situations that they could find themselves in this year. And just running the gauntlet in those is always going to be difficult.
I think Illinois fans may share a little bit of that pessimism because, to your point, Illinois has never made it to a bowl game following an 8 or more win season. They've always had a losing year right after whatever success they just followed that up with, right? An average to above average season immediately leads to disappointment the next year throughout the history of their program. So you certainly could take that path and go, well, for whatever reason, Illinois is snake bit. And I think those landmines would be the exhibit A for people that are going to take that. I think the offensive line can't be much worse than it was last year. And even if you do have some regression to the passing game, I know they lost Josh McCray, is that his name, to Georgia. That was the drama this last week of whether or not Bielema was calling out Georgia for tampering with him and et cetera. So, there are questions at certain positions for this team. But man, I just feel like the way they ended 2024, the way they beat South Carolina, the way that they've been putting together a team, like if not this team, then when, right? So I'm gonna say initially I was on the under train, but I'm gonna reverse course and I'm gonna say why not this year? Let's go 9-3.
Yeah, this is a team that for me is really easy to believe in. And again, I kind of mentioned it when we were talking about Indiana, but this is one of the 2 contender teams that brings their quarterback back from last season. And sometimes that's just because it's the guy you have. But when it's a guy who's not turning the ball over and who can run your offense and who can take care of the football, that's what I'm looking for, right? You're not going to be in that many bad spots. You do have to go to Indiana, so that's kind of a tough spot on the road right there. But you play Ohio State at home. At the very least, you're not going into a hostile environment with that one. Not picking them to win it, but at the very least, you're not, putting too much extra stress on that offense with the crowd noise, with the environment, and everything else that goes along with it. And look, for me, this is a team that if they drop to Indiana and Ohio State, I don't really see a whole lot of other teams on that schedule that tell me they have to lose that game. I trust this team to get it done. I trust this team to figure it out through the course of the season. They got a lot of experienced leadership on it. This is one of those teams that I think could have the really good year this year and then fall off next year just from talent loss and everything else that could be going on there. But this year is the year to get it done. Like this year, you said it, Mitch, it's the year to get it done. If it's not going to be this team, it may never happen for Illinois. I think this is a 10-2 football team. This feels real 10-2 to me. They should be in the mix for a college football playoff spot towards the end of the season. Again, I trust the quarterback to get it done. I just don't think they're going to drop too many games where they're in a tough spot where they go, oh, like look at Washington, right? Like if you go to Washington, that's a possible upset. But I think that Luke Altmaier takes care of the football and gets them a win there. You can do the same thing with Wisconsin. You go to Wisconsin. That's a tough spot to play, but I trust Altmaier to go get it done on the road. So I think this is a team that I really believe in and trust to take care of the football, to take care of their game, play within themselves, and end up competing towards the end of the year.
2 little nuggets before we move on, if I may.
Yep.
5-1 in 1 possession games last year was Illinois. That's
sure
always a red flag for me, just because that tends to even out over the course. Bielema as a coach has not had back-to-back 10-win seasons since 2010, 2011 when he was at Wisconsin. So it's been quite a while. I feel like I'm coming down really negative on Illinois. I think their defense is going to be legit, like maybe the best defense in the conference this year. But I want to believe so bad. And I think they're going to win 8 or 9 games. I just think the playoff hype is throwing me off and
Sure.
probably just making me want to tap the brakes on just the college football universe, penciling them in there.
And I think that's fair. I think, listen, take that, Fox News. We've got one playoff pick. We've got one kind of fence rider in my 9-3, and then we've got a possible 8-4. So I'd say that's fair and balanced across the board right there. That's why you come to the 3 Tech Pod, right? Indiana will be a fascinating case for so many reasons, as we've just highlighted. Let's go to number 4, the Michigan Wolverines, who have their own level of intrigue. Not because they're necessarily filling holes with portal additions, but because the youth movement is alive and well in Ann Arbor under Sharon Moore. Last year was kind of messy, right? Admittedly, did not go the way that most Michigan fans hoped a title defense year would go. And yet, the win over Ohio State was better than most Michigan fans, I think, could have ever hoped or dreamed for. And then they absolutely shoved Alabama in a locker in rainy Tampa and out-physicaled their way to a bowl victory to end the year on a high note. This year, though, after having just no quarterback play to speak of, it looks like they're probably going to roll with Bryce Underwood. Now, Mike Keene comes over from Fresno State. They've got, I guess, technically have another veteran option in Jake Garcia, but please don't do that. But more than likely, they're going to roll with the true freshman, the kid that they outbid LSU for to keep home. So much hype, so much talent in one quarterback. But Garrett, there are as many hopes and dreams and aspirations and projections about this team as there are questions, given the lack of experience, production, and dare I even say, like, flash when you talk about the wide receiver core. Like, I look at the wide receiver core and I'm not really impressed with necessarily anybody. So when you're trying to balance those two things out, the brand and the history of Michigan and the expectations that the Wolverines have with, some noticeable question marks, where do you start their preview?
Well, where I'd start their preview is I don't think we know anything about the Michigan offense last year because the quarterback play was about as boo-boo as you could possibly imagine it. It was so bad. I'm going to, one more time, just drag this out because we've talked about it a couple times, but for the preview, it's worth it. They threw for under 1,700 yards as a team last year with 12 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. That's not very good. That's not going to get it done. They had a 5.4 yards per attempt as a group last year. They weren't good. It was horrific. And they still found ways to win games that were pretty impressive. I mean, beating Ohio State, giving them the fuel to go win their championship. I'm going to let, some of the Michigan fans claim that because I've talked to a couple of them recently. I had some nice conversations with some Michigan fans over the 4th of July weekend. That was pretty fun, saying that they gave them the inspiration to go win their championship. But look, when you finish the season beating your rival and then, like you said, kind of shoving Bama in the locker, that's going to hit like some maize and blue crack for that. It's going to feel amazing. So there's a lot of good vibes for the Michigan Wolverines right now, but you got to be honest with yourself and say, I mean, what the heck do we really have? Do they have any good receivers on the team? They might. We'd have no idea because their quarterbacks sucked last year. There's no possible way for us to know if their receivers are talented, if they can really get open, if they really have someone who can get them the football, because we just didn't see it last year, right? We know they're going to run the football. They brought in the transfer running back. He's going to be fantastic.
Justice Haynes from Alabama.
Yeah, he's going to be great. I mean, did he get on the bus with Michigan to go home from that bowl game? I don't know.
Pretty much.
A
couple of Alabama players did.
He saw what happened and said, yeah, I'll take the other bus. And he just went in the other locker room to go celebrate the bowl win. But I mean, look, it's hard to know because so much of this is going to hinge on Bryce Underwood. I mean, so much of what their season is going to hinge on the freshman. And I've made this case a couple of times through the offseason. It can't possibly be worse than what it was last season. he can't possibly play worse. If he throws for not quite 1,700 yards and more interceptions and touchdowns, they'll bench him by week 4. Like that, he won't make it to that point. And so for me, I think if he can ascend a little bit higher, bring the floor up for that Michigan offense, get it back to where it's, even if it's just game manager levels, but maybe throw a little bit of flash every now and then, I think a lot of Michigan fans will take that, given what they're doing on the defensive side of the football, given the fact that that defense should still be really salty. I just don't know very much of, what they really are going to be bringing back in terms of the guys around him, because again, we didn't get to really see that showcase last year because of how bad that quarterback spot was. So we'll see if he can ramp up. That week 2 against Oklahoma is going to be a tough one for him to kind of figure it out. That might be a little bit of baptism by fire for him. But if he can figure it out and get his feet up underneath him before they hit October, I think they could have a really good season.
I think that certainly Chip Lindsey is gonna help, right? Let's start there with the offensive coordinator. Lindsey comes over from North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh start for Lindsey, and he's architected top 15 passing attacks in 2 of the last 3 years, 22, 23. Excellent seasons at Chapel Hill. Now, last year, he didn't really have a chance to succeed. Max Johnson, his starting quarterback, goes down in the opener against Minnesota, and then it was kind of a revolving door for North Carolina at quarterback after that. I think, given what we've seen from Underwood, there is certainly a lot of hope and a lot of optimism to believe that that passing game is going to take a step forward. I have questions about their wide receivers. I do not, however, have questions about the running game with Justice Haynes coming over. Jordan Marshall is an electric sophomore. He went for over 100 yards in that bowl game against Alabama. Trey, talk to me. Either you can stay with the offense or flip it over to the defense, where I think there's a lot more that I believe in and feel good about, even though they have to replace a number of NFL draft picks on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think as you guys are both talking, I feel like we were saying the exact same things about Nebraska last offseason. Really talented quarterback coming in. I think Michigan is much more talented top to bottom than Nebraska was last year. But just the makeup of their team, we feel really good about the running game. Feel like they'll figure the offensive line out, even though there's some transition there. Feel like the defense is really good. And yeah, they lost a lot on the defensive line. They lost, obviously, Will Johnson and a couple of their better pieces in the secondary, but they've been stockpiling talent there. They have probably the best linebacker tandem in the Big Ten in Ernest Hausman and Jayshon Barham. And I really liked what they got out of TJ Metcalf at the nickel position from Arkansas. I think that's going to be a huge big play pickup for them. It feels like a lot of the similar conversations we were having with Nebraska. And that came down to Nebraska started so hot because Dylan Raiola looked ready to go from the word go. Like his first few games, he was managing the offensive well. He was taking care of the football. Then some adversity hit, and it really started to spiral before they made that coordinator change. So I'm interested to see if he's able to hit the ground running. Garrett highlighted that week 2 game against Oklahoma on the road. That's going to be really difficult. A difficult environment. Oklahoma fan base that's really starved for success is going to try to will their team to a victory there. They go to Nebraska week 4, another really difficult environment that they're going to play in. But after that, it feels like a really nice runway until the Ohio State game at the end of the year. So to me, they might take a couple lumps early, but hey, even if you're 9-2 going into that Ohio State game, it's playing for a playoff spot once again, and having the card in your back pocket that you've beaten Ohio State so many times in a row. So even if they take their lumps early, I think they're going to let Bryce work through it. I like what you said earlier, Garrett. It's probably not going to be worse than what they saw last year. That's always
no way.
It's always kind of scary to say that because you never want to see what could be worse than the worst thing you've ever seen. But I'm confident that Bryce will be better if he can find receivers and if they can find an identity in that passing game without Colston Loveland. The whole identity in the passing game last year was give it to Colston Loveland 4 yards downfield and hope he can break a few tackles. They were not throwing the ball downfield last year. So even just the threat of that will likely open up the offense a little bit more. The defense, I'm confident at this point that a Michigan defense is going to be one of the conference's best and lead them to a couple wins when the offense sputters. So yeah, I think they'll be playing for something big when that game against Ohio State rolls around at the end of the year.
113th in scoring last year, 22 points a game ish. And that felt generous at times. 130th in passing. They didn't even get to 130 yards per game, and 129th in total offense. That's what we were looking at for a Michigan offense last year, and they
still went 7-5.
But they won 8 games by beating Alabama, right?
Yeah,
exactly. So they found a way to win, and now to both of your points, it can't be worse than it was last year. And while they do lose a number of draft picks along that defensive line, especially, right? I mean, the defense was absolute nails. They were 5th in rushing defense a season ago, 19th in scoring prevention, 10th in total defense. I understand that Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, all gone. But you look at who emerged in that bowl game against Alabama, Derek Moore on the edge, defensive tackle Rayshon Benny. They go to the portal and they get Trey Williams from Clemson. They get Damon Payne Jr. to hop on the bus with them from Alabama. It kind of feels like Wink Martindale might go, cool. All right, let's run it right back. And even if, okay, that defense isn't a top 10 unit, let's say they're a top 20 unit. If you marginally improve on the offensive side, like suddenly that 7-8 wins starts to look a lot more like maybe 9 or 10 wins. And so I think for me, when I look at their schedule and their over-under projection at 9.5 is where it sits as of time of recording. Boy, it's a good line. I'm right on the fence. I guess it comes down to, what do you believe will happen in week 2 when Michigan goes to Oklahoma? I know I'm probably higher on the Sooners than the two of you guys, but if Michigan can do what they tried to do to Texas last year, which is just turn it into a knife fight in the trenches, that feels like the way that Michigan goes on the road and pulls that one off. And then I think the over is squarely in play.
The thing that I think that we're possibly overlooking right now, and this is, again, we've talked about a lot of this and broken down a lot of this. One thing that we haven't really talked about is, what if Bryce Underwood delivers? Like, what if he lives up to the billing? What if he is the best quarterback of that draft class and he shows up and he's athletic and he's got an arm and he can elevate the play of the players around him? He starts making the receivers look good, opening up things in the run game. Like, what if this happens? That's the other side of this coin. Is we've kind of taken the, all right, pump the brakes, be pessimistic about the Michigan offense. There's a reality where bringing in the right quarterback just immediately elevates everybody else's game. If that's the case, then, I mean, 9.5, smash it, right? And I still think that you can take the over for that 9.5 right now. Like Trey said, there's a big gap of wins in the middle there that, leads up to that Ohio State game. It's been over 2,000 days since Ohio State has beaten Michigan in football. It's been since 2019. Again, it's got to go all the way back, pre-COVID for that stuff. I don't know if they get it done in Ann Arbor this year. Not if Bryce Underwood is, getting a full season to go and deliver and do what he wants to do. But yeah, I'd take the over right now in Michigan. I'm going to go back and say I'm pretty high on them. The other thing that we're kind of forgetting about and putting last year in a little bit of context is the coaching situation should be a lot more stable this year. Obviously, last year with like Harbaugh leaving after the championship, but it kind of was a delayed decision and there was like some drawn out stuff with it. And then obviously Sharon Moore comes in, but it's later in the offseason. It just kind of made it difficult for him to hit the ground running. He's been able to do this now for a full year. Hopefully has gotten everything under his belt, gotten a lot of the distractions out the door with investigations and everything else. Like, hopefully a lot of the chatter has calmed down and they can get back to focusing on football. I think that they probably have. I think it's going to be a really good Michigan team this year.
One of the more intriguing lines that we've got in this, and I know Michigan fans are excited to hopefully extend that winning streak over Ryan Day and Ohio State. I do think this is the year that it comes to an end. So that line of 9.5, boy, it's got me pinned in a corner. I could truly go either way. I'm probably going to lean the under, but a 9-3 season and trying to sneak into the playoff, I think is very successful for Michigan in year 2 with all the new pieces, especially on offense. Let's go to Eugene for the third-ranked team. The Oregon Ducks in our preview is voted on by you, the Jimmies and the Joes. Trey, I'm going to turn this over to you because in an effort to not start this on a sour note, I'm curious to hear from someone who has not tweeted that they are just out on Oregon this year. What do you like about this team? Dante Moore comes in at quarterback. Dan Lanning has obviously recruited very well. He's put together a solid defense, but this is not going to be the same team that went 13-0 last year and made it to the Rose Bowl and won a Big Ten championship. It feels like if there was a year for Oregon to maybe regress and take a step back, 2025 might be the year. Am I off?
So you want the optimistic picture for Oregon?
Well, I want your honest assessment of Oregon.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna have to turn it over to Garrett because I really tried to I tried to not read your preview article, Mitch, and come up with my own research and try to have my own takes on these teams. But man, if Oregon's ever gonna have a down year, it feels like this one, doesn't it? Because let me start with what I like about the Ducks.
Sure.
I love the pass rush. I think the pass rush is going to be elite once again. They've got Uyagulele, Tuioti. I think Bryce Bodicher at the linebacker position is maybe one of the best linebackers in the conference. All four starters are back in the second at the cornerback and safety positions. So defense looks like there's going to be some solid continuity there, maybe creating some havoc plays, helping the offense. I'm really concerned about the offense, though. I'm really concerned about the last time we saw Dante Moore in a full-time starting role. It wasn't great at UCLA. He gets thrown into the fire week really early with a Penn State whiteout game. I'm not excited about that potential. He lost Tez Bryant as his go-to receiver. He lost Evan Stewart to injury, it looks like, unless we have an update on that. I haven't seen one.
No,
but
torn patellar tendon. He's out for at least the majority of the year.
So maybe at the end of the year, but yeah, likely out. We're going to need to see more, the two Moores, right? Dante and also DeCorian, the guy that you and I got to see live quite a bit, calling you more than me, but the guy out of Duncanville, Texas, that left my jaw on the floor multiple times a game when I got to see him play live at Duncanville. So they're going to need both of those guys to make an instant impact to not see a drop off on offense. And it's possible. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Oregon's going to go 8-4 or worse. I think they have the talent, obviously, to be right there back up at the top of the Big Ten. And if they go back to the Big Ten championship game this year, I will not be shocked at all. But if Oregon was ever going to have a down year, I think it's this year.
Yeah. And I wrote, first of all, appreciate you siding with me in my research, even though you didn't read the preview. I wrote that a down year and being out, quote unquote, on Oregon for me is 10-2. What I mean by out is not that they're going to collapse, not that they're going to take this huge step backwards, that they're going to go 7-5 or 8-4. But when we talk about Oregon being a national championship contender and chasing that elusive first trophy, I don't believe that they're one of those teams that can be the final one standing. Now, that may age like milk, and come January or whenever we wrap up the college football season now, is it early February at this point, that, if Dan Lanning's raising that first trophy, then, obviously I'm going to give him his flowers, and this section of the podcast is going to go triple platinum. But the questions on the offense, aside from Mekhi Hughes, who's an excellent piece, comes up from Tulane, back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons in New Orleans. I love what Oregon is going to be able to do on the ground.
And Noah Whittington, too. Noah Whittington is an awesome compliment to Mekhi Hughes.
But when you think of Oregon football and what has made them successful these last few years, it has been being able to throw the football down the field. And it's been excellent quarterback play that they've gotten most recently from Bo Nix and then from Dylan Gabriel. And I just don't know that we're going to get anywhere close to the production that you've seen from those two past quarterbacks with Dante Moore. I'm not saying he won't. I'm not saying that he can't scratch that surface. I just don't know, because what little we've seen of him has been such kind of strikes and gutters. It's hard to make an accurate projection forward. You talked about the wide receiver core being a little bit thinner, a little bit more unproven. Yes, DeCorian Moore is a stud. You talk about a guy that's going to be a future all-conference nomination, a future All-American. it's DeCorian Moore, the number one wide receiver in the class, high school class from last season. But again, he's going to have that learning curve. He is going to have some ups and downs. And while Jeremiah Smith did it last year at Ohio State to an elite level, he also wasn't asked to just carry the offense on his shoulders, right? Everybody else around him was a proven 4 or 5-star. And I don't feel like Oregon quite has that continuity coming back this year on the offensive side. Now, the flip side of the coin is, could Oregon do what Michigan has done over these last couple of years? Could they win a championship by the defense? That was a proven storyline all year last year. You talked about what they've got, especially at the linebacking core, maybe one of the best linebacking cores in the entire country. Along the defensive line, they've got some interesting pieces. They add Bear Alexander, who comes from USC. Will he be more physical? Will he be more focused on the on-field product than the NIL packages off the field? We're going to have to figure that out. Dylan Thieneman comes over from Purdue, one of the best safeties in the country. He automatically upgrades that Oregon secondary that was last seen getting torched by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. Theron Johnson at cornerback comes over from Northwestern. So on the defense, I look at Dan Lanning's team and I go, check, check, check. You did everything right that you needed to do in this offseason to keep them at a championship contender. For me, it is truly just the offense and the lack of a perceived norm of what I know about Oregon Ducks football that's got me thinking 10-2, and sure, they might make the playoff, but I'm not right now considering them a national championship contender.
Man, you guys are all the way out on Oregon, man. It's I'd swear you guys are talking about them like they're about to go win 6 games this year, man. We don't trust the quarterback. Nobody's coming back on the line of scrimmage, man. A bunch of unproven receivers. I mean, enough about the Texas Longhorns, right? Like, we're talking about the same team model, a great coach that we think we can trust, a young quarterback who's got the talent. We just hadn't really seen it yet. Bunch of new faces on the offensive line. It sounded like the team in Texas as well. I don't know if that's what we're meaning to do. I don't know if you guys are saying that we're also going to expect a big step back from the Texas Longhorns this year.
That's next week, Gary.
That's next week. We'll get there.
I'm just saying,
that's
it sounds like the same team for me. So I'm going to expect here when we talk about this in a week that we keep the same energy. I'm kind of with you guys on Oregon. Okay, I'm just kind of with you guys. I think that again, someone has to lose. I think it's probably them, right? Like, if someone has to take that step back, I think it's probably Oregon that takes the step back. I don't think that they have what it takes to really get it done. I'm with you guys on the quarterback thing. I do think that he's talented, and I think the pieces around him are going to make his life a lot easier than they did at UCLA. But I do think that, yeah, there's going to be a learning curve for him, and I don't want to throw him into some of those positions he's going to be in early. But again, I think this is too well coached of a team for them to take a big step back. I think that this is still going to be a very good team that's in a little bit of a down year. This is kind of a reload, and I don't know that they quite have the pieces for it. Might be a slight swing downwards. I think 10-2 might be a decent line for them. Maybe a 9-3 if they just, can't quite figure it out at the quarterback position. But I'm not going to doubt a Dan Lanning team. They have looked way too good over the last couple of seasons figuring it out. Here's the only big problem for me. The Dan Lanning teams have yet to really figure it out on the biggest stage. Right? When they get to the biggest stage and that ultimate moment where they really got to come up in the clutch, they have kind of faltered, right? A couple years ago with Washington, and then last year, ultimately in the Rose Bowl, they faltered when they got to the big moment, right? You don't want to see that anymore. Don't know that they'll have that opportunity this year to show that they've overcome that, but it is kind of the next step for this program. It's interesting to watch and see. Again, I don't necessarily think that you guys are off in the evaluations. I just want to maybe pump the brakes on doubting them too much. It's still a very good team, and they might have the best running back in the conference. I believe in Mekhi Hughes. I think he's a great running back. I think he's going to light things up, and if I have to have a quarterback who I'm a little iffy on, I like being able to let him turn around and hand the ball to Mekhi Hughes.
I do want to correct myself real quick before someone comes at me in the comments. I misread my notes. They don't bring back all 4 of their corners and safeties from last year. They lose all 4 of their corners and safeties from last year.
They do.
Misread my notes on that one. But question for you guys. What record would shock you for Oregon on the low end? What would
Oh, okay.
what would you look at and what you would say,
I'd be
wow,
shocked at 8
I
and
was
4.
out on Oregon for Mitch or Garrett, you're obviously higher on them than us, but what would shock you guys on the low end?
8 and 4 would shock me.
8-4.
Okay, so you would not be shocked by 9-3.
Not necessarily. I think that requires at Penn State to be a definite loss. Indiana could still be really, really good. Iowa could be, as good as you guys are definitely hyping them up to be. I'm with you guys. They're a good team, but if they perform up to that ceiling, then yeah, Iowa could probably get them too. But if they lose another one of those games in addition to all those three, like I'd be shocked at this point.
Their closing stretch is disgusting. At Iowa, Minnesota, USC, at Washington. Like, yeah, I mean, there are definite landmines down the back end of that schedule. 9-3 would be like, oh, that's disappointing. 8-4 would bring serious questions to my mind.
I think 8-4 is the shock line for me too. I can look at the schedule and I can get them to 9-3 actually. Relative, like I don't think a ton of things need to go wrong to get them to 9-3. 8-4 would be kind of the shocking one. Anything less than that, we're starting to have some really serious questions, and we need to go find a quarterback, probably ASAP in the portal.
Now, flip side on all that, if they walk in there on the 27th and bust down the door at Beaver Stadium and just go in there and whoop some tail and show off, you can go ahead and look at the number one team and probably let
Absolutely.
them sit there
That's
for several
fair.
weeks because this
Absolutely.
team still has the positive upside, right? Like I don't think any of us are doubting that. Like I think all of us would say we could envision a world where this team lives up to what the hype is and finds a way to go undefeated.
I don't know that I'd go so far as to say undefeated. I wouldn't go that far.
No chance. You can't find the way.
I don't find a way to undefeated.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see what Garrett's saying. Like, if they do beat Penn State, like in theory, have they proven that they have the ability to go undefeated? Sure.
I'm just
The
saying
likelihood of that happening is.
I'm just saying you don't
not
think
very
there's
good.
any chance that like Dante Moore took a year off and he's actually a really talented passer.
There's a chance, yeah.
And like
I
maybe
think
UCLA was the issue for him, and it wasn't that he's like a bad quarterback. It's just the fact that he was
I don't
playing
know,
in kind of a
man.
bad system.
Go watch the Utah tape from that year. UCLA
it
was
was
a pretty
I'm not
decent
defending
team.
it. It was bad. It was really
it was
bad.
a Chip Kelly offense. That was about as gift wrapped an offensive scheme as it probably should have been. But we'll see. Again, this is part of the exercise, right? This is part of what we believe as all three of our storylines hinted at in the last episode. Like, the conference is deep. And just because you have an Oregon Duck on the side of your helmet does not necessarily mean that you're going 12-0, right? Like, there are going to be more landmines than ever throughout the course of a season. And to Garrett's point, like, teams that have walked in and beaten Penn State, thinking of Ohio State namely, it's on the back of a really good running game. It's not necessarily bombing the ball down the field, right? It's looking at Penn State's top 5 ranked rush defense and going, we don't care. We're running it through your face. We're going halfback dive, right? We're going power over the left tackle. And that has been the formula for success in beating Penn State over the last couple of years in conference play.
Well, and the only big point that I'm trying to make here is that I'm picking Oregon, like you guys, to take a little bit of a step backwards. But for me, this is that one team that I'm picking to take a step back that I'm most afraid of getting flamed for when they go undefeated this year. Like I just think this is that one team that, like, oh, I'm going to say Oregon's not that good and here's why. And then they're just going to go win the Big Ten and, be the number 1 seed or something like that. Like, it wouldn't shock me if that were the case. I'm a little afraid that it happens, if I'm being honest. I don't think that it will, but I'm a little afraid of it happening.
Well, again, like, just level setting expectations, taking the step back for the preview's sake is 10-2, right? Not 8-4. But we'll see. We'll see if Dante Moore comes out and lights the world on fire, then boy, we're going to have some crow to eat early on in the schedule. So,
Sure.
All right, let's go to Happy Valley. Penn State comes in at number 2. Probably could have done a coin flip in a lot of previews between Penn State and Ohio State, but we'll talk about the Nittany Lions first. And Drew Aller and James Franklin won big games last year. They objectively checked that box. Now, couldn't get over the hump, couldn't get past Notre Dame when they needed a drive late in the semifinal. to cash in a chance to play for a national championship, but progress was made nonetheless. And Penn State was there. They competed with Oregon. They did need Ohio State to lose to Michigan to make it to Indianapolis, but they were there. They held their own, and then they won playoff games and had a chance to compete for a national championship. All of those things, I think, before the season started last year, Penn State fans would have taken in a heartbeat. The narrative about James Franklin was that he can't win the big game ever. And even though they, were not able to ultimately claim college football's top prize, we made progress there. So that sets the stage to me, guys, where I think Penn State feels a lot like Ohio State did last year. Ohio State went out and they spent a bunch of money to get their veterans to come back and to forgo the NFL draft. You have Drew Aller coming back. You have both of the running backs, and Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, back in the fold. The defense is very, very scary, even after losing Abdul Carter off the edge. They've got big playmakers at linebacker and in the secondary coming back. And for me, I feel like this is the year that Penn State has no more excuses. They are expected to compete and maybe even win a national championship, according to some. This feels like the year that Penn State has at least got to make the national championship, or else have, a bunch of kind of ready-built excuses like injury or fluke plays to kind of blame, right?
Yeah, this is the easiest notes that I took on any team. It is now or never for James Franklin at Penn State. He has all the ingredients that he needs, the most experience, most talented roster he'll likely ever have as the head coach of the Nittany Lions. And that needs to pay off with another deep playoff run. I almost don't care as much what their ultimate standings in the Big Ten are. I think Ohio State proved that last year. Even if they take a couple lumps, as long as they get in, they need to win games in December and January to cement his legacy and to really disprove the allegations. They started that last year, I agree. But in the biggest moment of the season, against Ohio State, against Oregon in the Big Ten championship, against Notre Dame, when they just needed to take care of the football and drive and get a field goal to go play for a natty, it all fell apart again. So it's literally now or never. It's as simple as that. They got to find the biggest question for me. What is the passing identity outside of Tyler Warren? That ended up being the whole identity of the passing game last year.
Yeah.
He was a weapon all over the field. He ran the ball some as well. He even threw the ball. We got to figure that out. I love the pickups in the portal. Trevor Pena from Cuse and Devontae Ross, I think, right, from Troy.
From Troy, yep.
Yeah. So I love those two pickups. Those are two solid weapons. I think those are upgrades over what they had in the room last year, but they also need to show that they're willing to have an identity in that passing game that's outside of the tight end.
To use him, right? I mean, not a single reception in the semifinal game went to a wide receiver. The only completed passes in that game were to tight ends or to the running backs. It was check down nation for Penn State against Notre Dame. And so when I look at what the offense needs to do to improve, I need Andy Kotelnicki to step up in big games as well. Like, we talk about him, we sing his praises when they're beating Rutgers and when they're beating, their non-conference opponents. But I need to see him get Drew Aller to a place where he is comfortable to throw the football down the field. And not all of that's on Kotelnicki. Aller's got to take the step forward as well. He's been incredibly inconsistent. On one hand, you have NFL draft scouts looking at his film and going, this guy has all the tools to be the best quarterback in the draft this time next year. On the same hand, you could very easily make the case that, man, I just don't know that he has what it takes to win at the next level unless he shows us a level of progression in this final year in Happy Valley. I think he can take that level, that step forward in progression. I think he's got the tools around him. You mentioned the wide receivers. Kyron Hudson comes over from USC as well. So the stable is stacked. The running game is going to be phenomenal. And then, guys, you look at the defensive side, and last year under Tom Allen, it was great, right? The defense played well. This year, they have the guru of all defense in Jim Knowles coming over from Ohio State. A contract dispute led to Knowles saying goodbye to Columbus, coming to Happy Valley for an absurd amount of money. And now he gets to work his magic with a ready-made defense to win a championship. Ohio State fans don't like to remember that when Knowles first got there, their defense had become a little bit of a mess. They were not getting to the quarterback. The secondary was leaky at times. It was not the typical top 15, top 20 Ohio State defense that Buckeye fans expected. That was why you brought in Jim Knowles in the first place from Oklahoma State. This year, there's no rebuild that needs to happen. Penn State's defense can win a championship today. And now you're adding a genius like Knowles to a unit that returns starters along the defensive line, Dom DeLuca at linebacker, AJ Harris and Zakai Wheatley in the secondary. I mean, it's all coming up Penn State. As I look towards the pieces, it's just truly whether or not they can win those games and get through the biggest moments, especially on offense.
This is the one team for me that I have no issue just kind of being out on. And I might be an idiot for this. I'm just kind of out on the Penn State hype. Everyone that's saying that this is obviously their year to win the Natty because, it's just like how Michigan and Ohio State did it. I don't think so. The difference there is that Michigan and Ohio State the last couple of years had really good quarterback play that was effective when they needed it to be. And I don't trust this offense without Tyler Warren. I just don't. They got a great run game, like the two best running backs in the country, at least the best duo in the whole country. I'm not going to doubt that. They're going to be able to run the football, but I just don't think that Drew Aller's the guy to get them over the hump. I've seen him get all the accolades, but I pulled his game logs just to see if I was crazy. When he played Illinois, he threw for 135 yards. When they played Ohio State, he threw for 146. And then the last 4 games of the season, he threw for 226 against Oregon. He threw for 127 against SMU. Granted, it was very cold. I'll take the elements into account for that one. But against Boise, he threw for 171, and Notre Dame, he threw for 135. Is this the guy that I'm supposed to get excited about, even with some transfer wide receivers? I don't know if this is it. I get that he's experienced. I get that he's been there. I understand it. I totally understand the thing. I just feel like if we haven't seen it at this point, what else are we waiting to show? He's getting a lot of comparisons to Cade Klubnik at Clemson, right? Where they're the two guys that have been around for a while. It's a lot of the trendy people's national championship pick to say that it's going to be Clemson Penn State. The difference is Cade Klubnik struggled his first year and has looked freaking awesome this last season. Drew Aller looked all right, I guess, when he was throwing, 1/3 of the production to Tyler Warren. I just don't get where the production's supposed to really come from and why I'm just supposed to buy into it, especially when it's not like their schedule's the easiest thing in the world. They host Oregon. I don't think that's as much of a rollover game. They go to play at Iowa. They play at Ohio State. They play Indiana. These are games I think are very losable for them if they don't bring their A game, especially considering what they seem to produce in the offense when a good defense shows up on the other side of the field. So I don't think this is a terrible team. I don't think this is a team that's going to completely fall apart, but I don't think that this is a national championship contender. They might make the playoff. I think that's feasible, right? They might be better than the other teams just in their parts, but I don't think that this is a national championship contender, and I'm totally fine picking to be out on this team.
Trey, do you want to go into the numbers or do you want me to?
Go for it.
Okay. So I guess my questions would be twofold. One, where we draw on the line for quarterback efficiency, because last year Aller was 10th in the country in QBR. He was 16th in raw adjusted total. Right. So that includes some defensive metrics. Kotelnicki did not throw the ball down the field all that often, right? Because whether it was a combination of Aller and the wide receivers or Kotelnicki didn't trust the wide receivers, the efficiency of the run game, he didn't have to throw the football down the field all that much. So I know that he's at times struggled to hit some of those deep balls, but I guess I'm wondering what a metric is that we're pointing to and going this is why I don't believe
he's one of the guys that I feel like he looks good on paper, but I just don't love what I see when I turn the film on. He's not a bad he's not like he's terrible. I'm not saying that he's an awful quarterback who can't get it done, I'm just saying, like, he doesn't look like a guy who elevates the guys around him. A lot of times it looked like, when he was completing some of those sort of spectacular catches to Tyler Warren, I was like, oh, well, thank God he had a freak athlete out there to get it done, or thank God he had a guy to go out there and help him out on that one, because most tight ends are probably letting that one go over their head, or, can't come down with it. I guess for me, my big thing is I'm like, why is this team any different this year than what they were in previous years when they haven't really been able to get it done? If you want to tell me that one more year and we're just going to start pushing the ball down the field because we got some transfer receivers, okay, I guess. Like, I guess I'm okay with that logic. I just don't know that I'm like in the contenders tier when I see teams that did a really good job addressing needs in the portal. When I see teams that are bringing in a lot more production than what they did last year. When I see teams that are still stacked like Ohio State, like, again, the quarterback position is a question for Ohio State, but they're still pretty stacked. I just don't know where I'm supposed to sit here and say, oh, Penn State's obviously, but like the defense is going to be very good. It was really good last year too. But I don't know how much better the defense can play than how they played last season. And so if I don't think they're going to be way better on defense, and I think they'll still be very good, if not elite, possibly the best defense in the country. Like, if I don't think that that's it, I just don't know where I'm supposed to look at this and say, this is where we're going to dramatically be better on offense because like X reason. If we're just going to say he's efficient, but they didn't ask him to throw the football that much, okay. I guess if they're going to ask him to throw the football more, then I got to see what it looks like when they ask him to throw the football more. Is the efficiency because they asked him to be captain check down or captain throw it short, or is the efficiency because he really just is that guy? I haven't seen it, so I just don't buy it yet.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I think Aller has always been an efficiency guy. Mitch, you quoted the QBR. You quoted, I think he might have the top returning QBR in the country, if I'm remembering that.
That sounds about right.
I could be off on that, but they haven't asked him to chuck the ball downfield. And I think to get the offense over the hump, you're going to have to see that. It feels like JJ McCarthy to me at this point in his career, maybe with a little bit more running ability on McCarthy's side to get those first downs. But I think Aller's a capable runner and can pick up a first down with his legs when he needs to. It feels a lot like JJ McCarthy's career trajectory at Michigan. And you saw it in his senior year where you had to get people off of the narrative that, hey, he was just an efficiency monster and was only taking what was given by the defense because the run game was setting you up. McCarthy, by his senior year, was making big time throws and stretching the defense. And that's honestly what put Michigan over the top and made them a true championship contender. So if you buy Penn State as a championship contender, you're buying that last stage of the Drew Aller development. I think we thought we would see that last year. It did shy away. We saw glimpses of it. I'm thinking back to the West Virginia game where they're airing it out and we're thinking, oh boy, like we're getting a little hot and bothered by that Kotelnicki offense against what we thought was going to be a pretty solid West Virginia defense.
Yeah.
And obviously that wasn't great in hindsight, but I think if you're banking on Penn State as a true championship contender, you're banking on him taking that last step in the development, going from an efficiency guy to a guy that can put the team on his back in those biggest moments. And to be fair, we did see it in the playoff last year where he had that chance against a really good Notre Dame defense and he turned the ball over.
And threw a terrible pick.
Threw a terrible interception. So Mr. Efficiency and take care of the football didn't do his thing in the biggest moment of the season last year. So I see where both of you guys are coming from. And that is the big question. Can they find an identity in the passing game outside of Tyler Warren? And does Drew Aller take that final step and use all of that experience and efficiency to put the offense over the top?
I'll say he even reminds me of kind of the box that we put Will Howard in, right, for Ohio State last year. Now, Howard, much more mobile, much more willing to use his legs, less of a proven passer than McCarthy or Aller. But when he set his feet and made the throws that Ohio State needed him to make in pressure situations, that was what elevated Ohio State to win some of those big games. And when he got hot during that playoff run, when he took the lessons learned from Michigan, where he was in hell, right? I mean, Michigan had him running for his life. He couldn't make any throws against the Wolverines. Suddenly he gets his confidence back. He steps into throws. And then that was the game changer, right? I mean, he shredded the Oregon secondary, a secondary that had played solid ball up until that point in the Rose Bowl. So they do need to see, Penn State does. They do need to see Drew Aller be able to take over a game. And that point is very fair on Garrett's side.
Well, but my only kind of pump on that is like Ohio State had some absolute dogs at receiver who made that happen. I mean, like some of those throws were, I mean, dime throws. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Will Howard. I believe more in him last offseason than I do in Drew Aller now. But I still just, again, I'm just like, my only hang up on this is I have to see him when they actually need him do something, right? Like when they've played nobody state or who cares, he's put up good numbers. Like he's thrown it around. There've been broken tackles, and that's part of the game. But like I haven't seen it from him that he can be the guy to take it over the hump. And the only thing that I've read on Penn State is like they brought in a bunch of good transfers and maybe Kotelnicki here too or whatever. And I'm like, great. If we're going to say that those transfers are going to do with the wide receiver core enough to be matchup nightmares and run up and down the field and cause major issues, great. Drew Aller will go throw for a whole bunch of yards and I'll look like an idiot. I'm fine with that, but I just haven't seen it yet. And I don't buy it right now.
Separation was a massive issue for Penn State wide receivers last year.
Mm-hmm.
Pena can get loose in a phone booth. Hudson is a great athlete, and so is Ross from Troy. I think a name that a lot of people are going to learn this year, coming over from a Troy team that really struggled under Gerard Parker last year. So a lot of pressure on that wide receiver core. They know the task that's in front of them. Aller obviously has heard the headlines, the pros and the cons of his draft stock all off season long. And it is going to be one of the most fascinating storylines to watch here in 2025. With that, we have reached the number one team as voted on by the listeners here in the Big Ten Conference, and that would be the reigning national champion, Ohio State Buckeyes. Always fun to write the one preview that you can say they made it to the top, right? Out of 136, they were the last ones standing, hoisting that national championship trophy. We talked about the strategy earlier in the episode where Ohio State went all in on retaining their roster from 23 to 24. They bring in Will Howard to be a little bit more of an athlete than Kyle McCord was. I think we understood very quickly last year that McCord was not the thing holding this Ohio State offense back, right? As a result, the Buckeyes were able to have a very balanced attack. Jim Knowles had that defense absolutely singing. And by the end of the year, we were saying that the mantra defense wins championships was proven throughout the entire season by these Ohio State Buckeyes. But now they turn the chapter. And my number one storyline here is Julian Sayin, the new quarterback that they're turning the keys of the kingdom over to. Ryan Day is an offensive guy. Obviously, they've got all the wide receivers in the world, but how will this 6'1" sophomore, who has been told since he transferred from Alabama, hey, you're the chosen one, you're the next guy to take over Buckeye football, how will he handle that pressure and step into that role? We talked about the skill players. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, just cheat codes, right? They're going to be disgusting to use in the new college football video game. They are equally as gross when you get them on a real life football field. But that's not all that Ohio State did, guys. They didn't just retain their wide receivers. They bring in the best tight end in the portal in Max Clare from Purdue, a guy that every team in the country wanted on their roster. They bring in CJ Donaldson from West Virginia, an absolute bowling ball at the running back position to pair with James Peoples. And, Ohio State fans are rebuffing the Michigans and the Penn States and even Minnesota, saying, hey, you know what? We belong in that top 3 conversation for running back rooms in the conference as well. And then they do replace Jim Knowles with another familiar name, not to college football circles, but to football fans in general, and Matt Patricia, who's won Super Bowls at the NFL level with the Patriots and obviously knows how to coach defense. The question for Patricia is, did he lose some of that magic in the time that he left Bill Belichick's staff, went to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions? That didn't go over well. So can he kind of get back to those roots of calling a sound defensive game plan, and can it stand up to the high pace nature of modern college football? Ohio State's an interesting case study here as we get into 2025. And on one hand, I think absolutely with the right pieces and the right bounces of the ball, we could say that they're the first team to go back to back in quite some time in college football. On the other hand, I wonder if statistically there's going to be some regression back to the mean. And again, by the mean, I really mean 10 wins, 10-2 and making the playoff.
Well, I mean, we don't have to look far to see a national champion lose a bunch of production and then not have a stellar season the next
School up
year,
north.
right? Not just returning production on the field with players, but returning production in the coaching boxes as well, because this is a team that obviously is going to be on paper the most talented in the Big Ten. I don't think there's any question, top to bottom, when you just look at recruiting rankings, they're going to be the most talented team in the Big Ten. But they replace so much, man, like so much in one offseason, replacing the quarterback. I think we just assume that the running backs will be fine. And I love that they have a guy named Lamar Bo Jackson coming in as a 4-star recruit. Like, it's not only Lamar Jackson, it's also, he goes by Bo, which is just amazing. But and obviously Jeremiah Smith and Cardinal Tate are going to be fantastic safety blankets for Julian Sayin, but they have the top end talent. They showed last year that they had depth to win a national championship. It wasn't necessarily just the top end talent that put Ohio State over the finish line. They had depth of talent. And now that depth is going to get more playing time this year. So I'm interested to see how that goes. We're just kind of assuming that there's not going to be a learning curve. Both, you mentioned defense, but it's also a new offensive coordinator. The depth of the coaching staff last year, has there ever been, maybe outside of Tuscaloosa, I don't know if there's ever been a more talented trio of Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Jim Knowles assembled in a coaching top three. Sure. Now we still got Ryan Day, but we've got a first-time offensive coordinator in Brian Hartline, a first-time college defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia. It's just a lot of turnover. And would I be shocked if they won less than 10 games? Yes, absolutely. I don't think they're going to have a 2024 Michigan season because the offense just is too cohesive to do that, and they have too much talent on that side of the ball. But even with all that talent last year, they still went 10-2 in the regular season and lost at Oregon and lost to Michigan. So just saying that they are going to be automatically back in the college football playoff, I think is maybe taking a step too far. Will they be there? In all likelihood, yeah. But it's going to be a really interesting road to get there, I think.
So let's go to the schedule, because Ohio State's schedule, their over under is 10 and a half. Yep. Right there at the top of the conference. So Ohio State's schedule looks like this. Start with a little team from Austin called the Texas Longhorns coming up to the shoe for week 1. Think they're going to be a couple eyes on that ball game to start the season. Grambling State and Ohio to finish off the non-conference slate. Bye week and then a tricky road game against Washington. We talked about them in the dark horses tier. That's a Huskies ball club that could absolutely jump up and bite you in the Pacific Northwest. Minnesota, Illinois, at Wisconsin, Penn State. They've got Michigan to finish out the year. There are certainly some landmines on this schedule. Now, with all of that being said, I think you do have to remind the folks at home that Ryan Day against teams not named Michigan, I think is 56-1 in Big Ten play, and that one loss outside of the school up north came by 1 point to Oregon last year, right? So
when his quarterback forgot how many timeouts he had.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was,
and if it weren't the case, they were kicking the field goal and winning. So
there was some gamesmanship from Dan Lanning that got a rule change. Like it took a very specific set of circumstances.
It's like a Herculean effort. I think he did lose one of the Purdue games. I think one of the Purdue games
he
was
might
right
have,
there. But
okay,
the point still stands. It's a fantastic record outside of Michigan.
Yeah, he just doesn't lose to any team outside of the maize and blue, right? And so you can certainly say like, oh well, yes, this schedule is tough, and Ohio State has to plug some holes and answer some questions. But gosh darn it, they found a way to do that. On the other hand, you could also make the case that eventually that streak has to come to some sort of an end, right? We saw it come to an end against Oregon, and they go 10-2 and have that uncharacteristic loss to Michigan that only happens in a rivalry game situation. So the hypotheticals here are fascinating, and I do wonder. I think if Ohio State could find a way to beat Penn State off of a bye, right, to open up the month of November, at that point it feels like the rock would be pushed over the hill. I don't know that you would be able to stop the Buckeye momentum, because then you're talking about wins at Purdue versus UCLA and Rutgers, both at home. And then going on the road to Michigan, where I just feel like streaks are meant to end. And it's what, 5 in a row for Michigan?
Since 2019.
Yeah. So, and they didn't play in the COVID year.
Yeah.
So, eventually it feels like, okay, like it's got to swing back the other way. The Buckeyes, for all the, questions and things that they just objectively have to replace in this sport that is college football, they could roll into the playoff with all kinds of momentum just as easily.
Yeah, this is a fantastic team, and for all the questions I've had about teams, I have almost no questions about Ohio State. Like, if I really want to nitpick, I could say, like, ooh, well, like, Noah Mekabuka, can Carnell Tate be that number 2 to take some pressure off of Jeremiah Smith? Like, but I'm nitpicking, right? Like, I have to really get down, scrape the bottom of the barrel before I find problems with Ohio State, where I say, like, yeah, that's going to, for me, my biggest question, I guess, is going to be, was last year just like, there was a moment where it snapped and Ryan Day just locked into like a trance state after, kind of losing to Michigan and saying, like, I have to find a way to save my job. Let's go win the Natty. Like, was that what happened? Or did they actually get over the psychological like issue that seems like it was what was stopping Ohio State from getting over the top? They've been talented. They've had amazing quarterbacks. And it's always just been like one little thing that stopped them from winning the championship. They almost got there several times, and it's a kick that never had a chance as the clock strikes midnight at New Year's, right? And otherwise, that was a championship a couple years ago. It really is like just the little things with Ohio State. And this last season, they finally put it all together and figured it out. And it might have taken losing to Michigan after everything to kind of kick him in the pants a little bit and say, hey, let's get going. I think there's a really good chance they go 11-1 this year. I think they got a real good chance at possible undefeated. I think if they're going to lose one, honestly, if you made me pick between losing to Texas or in Ann Arbor, I'd tell them you're probably going to lose in Ann Arbor more, just because there's something about that game that has been a problem for Ohio State. I think they have a really good chance to beat Texas off the top of the season. I think they have a really good chance to beat Penn State at home to start November. This is a very good team. And the more time you give Sand to kind of settle in, find his feet, he's got the targets out there. He's got plenty of guys that can get it done for him out there. He's got a great run game that he can rely on. This is going to be a very good Ohio State team one more time. I think this team has what it takes to go back-to-back and win the whole thing again.
Okay. There you go. Back-to-back national
you hear me, Joe?
championship.
I know you moved east for a couple. You hear me, Joe? I'm praising your team for a second.
Okay. All right. Well, we will get to our playoff picks, our national championship picks, obviously at the end of preview season, once we get through the Power Four. But Ohio State making a strong case to go back-to-back. Would love to know what you guys think at 3Tech Pod. You can write in. You can leave comments on the Spotify feed. You can write us an email, 3techpod@gmail.com. We would love to have your feedback here on the Contenders. Maybe you wrote the teams in a very different order than what we ended up going through them. We would love to know, certainly like kind of group by group. If you have big abnormalities or big changes, write those in. Let us know how you would have ranked them and who you've got winning the Big Ten as well. Very excited to get into all of that in our season championship picks here at the end of preview season as well. Next week, we start with the SEC, the vaunted SEC, a conference trade that cannibalized itself last year. We'll talk about if that's going to happen once again, who is in contention to win that conference, and just how deep the Southeastern Conference is going to be here in 2025. But we appreciate you, the Jimmies and the Joes, weighing in on the Big Ten, hanging out with us all week long. Big Ten's wrapped up. The SEC is up next. For Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.